You know, there are some games that never really leave you. Whether it's the story, the gameplay, or just the way they made you feel, they stick with you no matter how many years pass or how many new releases come along. So today, I'm sharing 25 titles that I truly treasure, no matter how much time goes by. If any of these are already on your favorites list, make sure to drop a comment below. Alright, let's jump in. Kicking off our list is Red Alert 2. So Red Alert 2, there's a game that just screams nostalgia, right? The funny thing is, even when I fire it up today, it's still a blast to dive back into those crazy over-the-top battles. The game's campy vibe seems impossible not to love. I remember being absolutely obsessed with perfecting those perfect strategies, like ambushing with Tesla coils out of nowhere. And Yuri? Unbelievable. His mind control mayhem turned the battlefield into a chessboard where the pieces wanted to kill you. There's something so pure about Red Alert 2's balance of challenge and absurdity. It's got the complexity you'd expect from a strategy game, but then thrown against the most ridiculous backdrop possible. It's like the best kind of comfort food, and no matter how much time has passed, it feels like home. Even the pixelated graphics still hold this weird, enchanting charm. Sure, they look dated by today's standards, but it never really takes anything away from how good it feels to play. That blend of military strategy and bonkers design choices, the giant squids, the time machines, it's just classic. I'm nostalgic for those nighttime LAN battles too, when we'd connect our clunky computers just to see who could outsmart the other. The funny thing is, after all these years, Red Alert 2 has a grip on me just as strong as it did back then. Next up is Battle Realms. Who remember this one? Battle Realms is one of those games that never got the spotlight it deserved, but those who know it, you know. Battle Realms had such a unique vibe, blending feudal Japanese themes with some mystical elements. It was like Age of Empires, but with samurai and dragons, stuff like that. What got me hooked was the way soldiers would level up based on how you use them. Send a peasant to the dojo, and you've got yourself a warrior. Play smarter, and you could upgrade that warrior to a powerful samurai. That kind of organic unit progression added a layer that made you think carefully about every decision. Plus, the atmosphere was just spot on. Even though the graphics aren't crazy by today's standards, they had this hand-painted charm that still looks kind of cool. The story was another highlight. Each clan had their own narrative, with characters that felt surprisingly deep for this kind of game. The Dragon Clan's honor versus the Serpent Clan's ambition, it was gripping. One thing's clear, Battle Realms might not be as talked about as other RTS classics, but every time I go back to it, it feels like rediscovering a hidden gem. Those epic battles, the careful balancing act of managing your resources and upgrading your armies, it's like I'm back in that sweet, sweet moment of discovery. Next up, we have Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Talk about a game that defined a generation, right? There's something timeless about it. Well, the game is kind of time-related as well. The fluid parkour moves, the acrobatics, and oh man, the ability to rewind time. Remember back when reversing all those mistakes was just mind-blowing? It was the coolest thing. Every jump, every wall run felt so precise, like the game was in sync with your brain. What's incredible is how well it still holds up. Sometimes I think about those big, expansive levels, those deadly traps that dared you to make a single mistake. And the story? I got really drawn into that whole Ruins of Lost Kingdoms vibe. Prince and princess, sands running through your fingers, the whole deal. Whenever I play it before, I don't just think about the hours I spent trying to master all the moves, but also how it made me feel like I was starring in some action-packed epic. The time mechanics, though, they're still top tier. I mean, they could have been like a cheap gimmick, right? But every rewind feels purposeful, like you're really getting a second chance. I might have played 1,000 games since then, but Sands of Time stuck with me. The way it blends storytelling with gameplay, that's magic. And you just don't see it done that way anymore. So, up next is the Frozen Throne. Man, what an expansion, right? I know a lot of people remember it for Arthas's descent into madness. And yeah, that storyline was epic. But for me, it's all about the little things that made the game feel alive. Remember climbing up to the top of Icecrown? Getting there was half the fun. And then the way the map shifted as you progressed through the story, those little details really pulled you in, gnawing at you to keep exploring. The quest to find Frostmourne, that was a treat, don't get me started. I mean, World of Warcraft had already hit its stride, but the Frozen Throne, it just took it to the next level. When you think about it, the expansion is practically a playthrough guide on how to deliver sustained world building. If you were there, you know that what made the Frozen Throne so special. I still find myself thinking of the game whenever I watch one of those dramatic showdown scenes in movies or TV. Those final moments of Arthas felt like they came straight out of a blockbuster fantasy flick. Next up, we have the Super Mario Bros. 3. This game just feels timeless, like you could fire it up today and it would still be fun. Every second of this game is ingrained in gamers' DNA, whether they grew up with it or discovered it later. There's something oddly perfect about the simplicity of running, jumping, and flying with the Tanuki suit that still resonates. Plus, each world in the game had its own flair, like icy terrains full of slippery platforms or the oversized enemies in Giant Land, which made it feel like a grand adventure instead of just another platformer. I always remember waking up on Saturday mornings before anyone else just to sneak in a couple of levels before the day officially got going. My biggest struggle was holding onto that dang P-Wing until the perfect moment. And let's not ignore the little things, like finding those hidden flutes that'd warp you halfway across the map. It felt like you had discovered a major secret. There's an argument to be made that the game has aged, sure, but it's kind of like a classic novel now. The graphics might not stack up to modern games, but the design, kind of flawless. I sometimes wonder if any Mario game will ever top it for me, not necessarily because it was the pinnacle of Mario gaming, but because it hit at this perfect time in our lives when everything about it felt magical. Next is the iconic GTA San Andreas. Now, GTA San Andreas is an absolute juggernaut. I still remember feeling like this game had absolutely everything. A living, breathing world where you could do, well, pretty much anything. The story mode was intense, sure, but who else spent countless hours just messing around, pushing the boundaries of what the game would let you get away with? It was the game that dared you to skip that next mission just because riding bikes around the city or trying to max out your muscle stat could eat up entire afternoons. The first time riding a BMX down Grove Street felt iconic, straight out of a 90s movie. And let's not sleep on the soundtrack, weaving together various radio stations that felt perfectly reflective of your chaotic exploration. The map was also just wild. To this day, I still don't think I've fully uncovered every little secret hidden away in the corners of San Andreas. And when you look at how expansive the world was, it's just crazy to imagine how Rockstar managed it on the hardware at the time. Cranking up the old radio stations till you're drowning in 90s beats while cruising through the streets of Los Santos, that's a memory. I'm always coming back to San Andreas not because of what it can offer now, but because of everything it gave me back then. The freedom, the chaos, the pure joy of wandering through its open world without a care in the world. Then there's CJ, the man, the myth, the only GTA protagonist who made the time between missions actually feel like part of the story. Something about how the game was curated, everything from the character interactions to the mission structure, still resonates with me. I'll find myself lost in its world all over again. Up next is Grand Theft Auto 5. GTA 5 had to be mentioned here too. I mean, it's the gift that keeps on giving, right? Los Santos feels like a playground that just keeps getting new rides. Now, when it first dropped, I didn't fully grasp how much this game would stick with me through the years. The storytelling was on point, those intertwining narratives of Michael, Franklin, and Trevor. Rockstar actually made me care about 3 protagonists at the same time, which is no small feat. And the world, Los Santos, feels alive in a way that few games capture. Whether I'm revisiting it for the umpteenth time or diving into GTA Online, there's always something new to uncover. I still find myself marveling at the insane details, like how NPCs react differently depending on your actions or how the sky looks at different times of day. I mean, the sun sets in this game, so there's this freedom you get from just messing around with whatever you stumble across in the city. Trevor's madness, Michael's midlife crisis, Franklin's climb out of the hood, they each offer their own brand of chaos. And then you have the heists. Those were game changers for me, no doubt. Just the amount of planning, the different approaches, it was all top tier. Plus, Rockstar's mind for detail, like when you're just walking down the street and something totally random happens. It's those small moments that remind you how much heart is in the game. For these reasons, GTA 5 remains one of those games I keep coming back to, no matter how many years go by. It just nailed that sense of immersion, where you're not just playing out a story, you're living in this wild, unpredictable world. Next on the list is the 2005 Resident Evil 4. This game was dropped at a time when survival horror was at a crossroads, and man did it make an impact. I still remember the first time I faced those Ganados. It was terrifying in a way that felt different from Raccoon City's dark corridors. The shift to that over-the-shoulder perspective added this whole new layer of tension. You're in Leon's shoes now, and the stakes feel personal. The way you had to manage your inventory felt like a puzzle, especially when you're scavenging for ammo, herbs, and the ever-elusive yellow herb. Everything mattered. Every bullet, every movement. You weren't just fighting zombies, you were tactically outmaneuvering them in real time. And let's not forget the unforgettable village fight. That first encounter where wave after wave of enemies launches a relentless assault on you. The adrenaline already set the tone. It's like the developers knew they had something special right then and there, and it didn't stop there. The variety in the enemy designs, the pacing, the intense boss fights, each escalate the tension in just about the perfect way. Every time I look back at this game, I'm reminded of how Resident Evil 4 became a blueprint for modern survival horror games. Today, this game still maintains its throne. It wasn't just about the jump scares, it kept you on edge by giving you the tools you needed to survive, but always leaving you questioning if you'd last to the end. Every time I restart it, I'm flooded with a sense of nostalgia for when I first became part of Leon's nightmare, weaving through the adrenaline rush and remembering why it captivated us all those years ago. If you've been following my channel, you know that I keep on mentioning The Witcher 3 over and over again. There's a reason why. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt set a new bar for RPGs, didn't it? I still get chills from the first time the game opens up and you're thrust into that overwhelming, beautifully grim world. There's just something about roaming the fields of Velen or trudging through a snowstorm in Skellige that feels like home. And Geralt. How do you top a protagonist like that? The way CD Projekt Red portrayed him as this gruff monster hunter with a heart, a well-hidden one, sure, it's impossible not to get attached. Taking contracts, exploring the depths of every cave or ruin never gets old, but it's the smaller stories within the world that impressed me the most. That quest with the Bloody Baron, it's unforgettable. You start off thinking it's just another monster hunt, but then it spirals into this dark, emotional journey. Witcher 3 is where storytelling became so intertwined with gameplay that every dialogue choice you made felt genuinely significant. And the music? Oh man, that soundtrack just perfectly amplifies every moment. Riding through the fields with that epic score playing in the background, it feels like you're the hero in some timeless saga. Even now, I'm finding new things in the world. Some tiny village I'd missed, a random Skellige cliff overlooking the sea. There's that sense of life in every corner of the game. It's truly a living, breathing world. On top of everything, Gwent, it's funny how a minigame ended up becoming a huge part of why I spent so many hours just roaming from town to town. Re-immersing myself in The Witcher 3 never gets old. For the story, the characters, and the world. It's like meeting up with an old friend you haven't seen in years, only to pick up right where you left off, like no time had passed at all. Now let's talk about Little Big Planet. It's one of those games that oozes creativity in a way that feels unmatched. The moment that sack puppet takes its first wobbly steps, you're plunged into this world of imagination paved by cardboard, fabric, and far-fetched gadgets. Even after all these years, it's impossible not to smile at the joyful absurdity of the world. It's like you're stepping into a child's dream world, where anything and everything is possible. The game has its own sense of charm. The handcrafted look was pretty revolutionary back then and still holds up. I remember spending hours, not just playing, but building new levels, rigging up convoluted contraptions that often didn't work, but were incredibly fun to create. There's something so pure about a game that encouraged you to not just play, but to make, to shape, to invent. And the multiplayer? Trying to finish a level with my friend or getting into those adrenaline-pumping races. It's all burned into my mind as these little gems of gaming history. It's funny because at first glance, Little Big Planet seems simple, almost childlike, but the depth of the gameplay, especially when you dive into the near-infinite user-generated levels, it's something else. What really blew me away was the game's emphasis on community and sharing, where all these user-generated worlds made you feel connected to others. Even now, I get the itch to go back, just to see what other insane creative masterworks people have come up with. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to do that anymore. Well, you know, I'm already an adult and need to do some even more important things in life. But even though Little Big Planet remains this beautiful testament to the joy of playing and creating in equal measure. Up next is BioShock Infinite. BioShock Infinite is one of those games that you still think about years later. not just for its gameplay, but for the story. The way it unfolded and kept you guessing until the very last second. The floating city of Columbia was pretty unlike anything I'd seen in a game. It's weirdly beautiful, almost utopian, but beneath the surface, there's a dark underbelly that's just waiting to sink you into its depths. I couldn't stop marveling at the way Infinite blended its narrative with those almost chaotic Skyline combat pieces. Zipping around, launching yourself onto enemies below, that on-rails shooting had this wild, adrenaline-pumping energy. The portrayal of Elizabeth, her AI felt revolutionary at the time. She wasn't just some tag-along. She was a helpful companion with an oddly developed personality. The dynamic between her and Booker is one of gaming's best duos for me. Then there's the way the game tackles themes like American exceptionalism, racism, and dimensional theory. It's way more than just mindless shooting. And the ending, oh man. The first time I got there, my mind was blown. That revelation had me reflecting on the whole journey, turning the whole story upside down. BioShock Infinite weaves together atmosphere, narrative, and gameplay in a way that's still unmatched. That haunting hymn of Columbia, the fractured reality, and that ending. I can't shake them. And even years later, I find myself totally amazed with everything this game has to offer. It's one of those titles that makes you want to discuss every detail, every nuance, with anyone who's also experienced it. Next up is God of War 3. God of War 3 set a high bar for cinematic action-packed gaming, no doubt. Bringing the brutality and grandeur to the next level, this was the game that really elevated Kratos, turning him from a rage-filled anti-hero into something like a god-killing spectacle. The scale in this game is just beyond what I'd ever imagined from a video game. Right off the bat, you're battling Poseidon in this jaw-dropping, camera-swooping sequence that flows right into the action without a hitch. Seriously, when I first saw those Titans climbing Mount Olympus, I was floored. Kratos' singular drive for revenge combined with those epic boss battles, it had this almost primal appeal that kept pushing you forward through rivers of blood and mythological grandeur. And the combat, it was visceral, it was satisfying, combining the precise timing of attacks with the over-the-top spectacle we'd come to expect from the series. And do not get me started on the weapons. Each felt unique, had its own style, and completely changed the way you played. Then, there's the ending. By that point, how could it end any other way? Kratos' rage was unstoppable, but the consequences of his quest hit heavy. It felt like wrapping up not just a chapter, but a saga. Even today, I think God of War 3 still stands tall in the pantheon of action games. While the latest God of War games are fantastic, I can't really compare them head to head because I think God of War 3 is more on bringing chaos than what we have right now. Well, all other God of War games from the recent years are also totally worth playing. Up next is Hades. We're talking about a game that took the roguelike formula and just perfected it, right? I'm still finding myself getting utterly hooked anytime I revisit the underworld. Initially, I wasn't sure how deep I'd get into it, but something just clicks the moment you start chaining together dashes and attacks with such precision, dancing around enemies like you've done it 1,000 times before. Wait, maybe that's just me actually doing it 1,000 times because each run is so compelling. The way the developers tied narrative into the loop of repeated runs, genius. You're not just fighting through the layers of hell, you're unraveling a story with each failed attempt, piecing together more about Zagreus' quest, his family, and why in the world he keeps trying to break free. And the way they incorporated Greek mythology into the game. The gods not only aid you, but have their riveting personalities. When Athena or Zeus gives you their favor, it feels personal, like you're gradually winning them over, and it fundamentally changes your run. The voice acting, the humor, the kick-ass soundtrack, everything's just in sync. Plus, it helps that the action feels so damn good. I mean, every weapon feels distinct. Every boon shifts the flow of battle, pushing you to adapt on the fly. Perseverance feels like it's worth it in Hades. You're inching your way closer to the surface, to victory. And even when you finally break the loop, the urge to dive back in, to learn more, to fine-tune your approach, it never goes away. Hades has this razor-sharp focus on delivering a non-stop frenzy of action and story, all wrapped in a game that's totally replayable and somehow always leaves you wanting more. Batman Arkham City nailed what it meant to be The Dark Knight. No second thoughts about it. This game didn't just give you Gotham, it gave you a chunk of it, a playground for every Batman fan out there. The first time I realized I could just glide through the sprawling city from rooftop to rooftop is unmatched. The combat mechanics, they were so satisfying, nailing that feeling of being a one-man army. Each kick, each punch felt like a perfectly timed dance, flowing seamlessly as you took down an entire room of thugs without breaking a sweat. What makes it even better is the way the game's lore is soaked into every alleyway, every corner. You're constantly discovering hidden bits that flesh out both Gotham and its rogues gallery. I remember being floored by the portrayal of the Joker, who's like this ticking time bomb throughout the entire game. Arkham City captured the twisted relationship between him and Batman perfectly. Oh, and the side missions? I spent hours just chasing down every villain, from the Riddler's mind-bending puzzles to Josh's creepy phone calls. Each felt like it was worth diving into. The story had so many twists and turns, and the ending, without spoiling anything, left me speechless. I couldn't believe they went there with those final scenes. Rocksteady really made you feel like you were donning the cowl, embodying the Batman, and navigating through Gotham. We all have our favorite Batman moments, and I can't help but think that those set in Arkham City are some of the best. Next up, we have the 2002 Mafia. Before GTA San Andreas ever stole my gaming heart, there was Mafia. This game, man, it was something else. It wasn't just another open-world game, it was a full-blown cinematic experience set against the backdrop of the 1930s. The story of Tommy Angelo, a cab driver turned mobster, completely sucked me in. Unlike other crime-centric games, Mafia was more about the narrative, filled with suspense, betrayals, and the rise and fall of a man trying to navigate the brutal world of organized crime. The attention to detail was unlike anything I'd seen before. The vintage cars, the way the city felt alive in its own right, it was captivating. And even though games like San Andreas came along later with more expansive worlds, Mafia's story always stuck with me. The best part is that it's still worth diving into today, especially now that we have the definitive edition. They've polished up the visuals, enhanced the gameplay while keeping the heart of what made the original so special. So if you didn't get to experience Mafia back in the day, or if you just want to relive that gritty, gripping story with a fresh coat of paint, the Mafia Definitive Edition is absolutely something to check out. It's a walk down memory lane, but with all the modern comforts to make it even better. Trust me, it's one of those games that deserves your time, even now. Gears of War 3 took everything that made the first two amazing and turned it into this epic, heart-pounding experience that feels just right even today. I'm talking about chainsawing locusts, diving across cover, and yelling with your buddies as you take down a corpser the size of a building. It's like the culmination of this brutal, beautiful, battle-hardened trilogy. The story here really amped up the stakes. Especially hit me right in the feels. Mixing in that emotional punch with the constant adrenaline-pacing combat, quite a combo. They added in new weapons, new enemies, but what really struck me was how polished the whole experience was. Everything just flowed. And Horde mode? Man, it's what made the game an absolute blast to play with friends. It's this perfect mix of strategy, action, and sheer panic as you scramble to fortify your defenses between waves, hoping against hope that you all make it through to the end. Each character, from Marcus to Dom to Cole and Baird, feels like they've grown into this lovable mess, and seeing them interact like brothers in arms heightens the action. Plus, the set pieces in this game are off the charts. Whether you're battling a lambent leviathan or blazing through the ruins of a fallen city, the sheer scale of the chaos never lets up. Gears of War 3 turned boots-on-the-ground gameplay into an art form, with the best cover mechanics, insane weapons, and a thrilling narrative that wrapped up the original trilogy perfectly. Even years down the road, jumping into those firefights still gets my blood pumping. Tornadoes of dust, shattered concrete, and a chainsaw bayonet never felt so right. Moving forward, we have Assassin's Creed 2. Now, Assassin's Creed 2 was where the series truly hit its stride. You step into Ezio's shoes, and suddenly, it's more than just clambering over rooftops, it's about revenge, redemption, and unraveling this massive conspiracy that spans centuries. The Italian Renaissance setting set this next level for the series, where every cobblestone street, every square felt alive with history and culture. I still can't get over that feeling when you first scale to the top of that tower in Florence and see the city spread out beneath you. The leap from Altair in the original to Ezio felt monumental. Ezio was more layered, more relatable. And let's be real, who didn't enjoy unlocking all those new gadgets from Leonardo da Vinci? The blades, the smoke bombs, and the flying machine. It made every assassination a blend of strategy and style. What makes the game even more memorable is the dual storyline, alternating between Ezio's journey in the past and Desmond's modern-day narrative. It felt gripping, like peeling back layers to uncover this massive plot. And the side missions, like hunting down those targets, collecting feathers, or decrypting those mysterious glyphs, so satisfying. The seamless blend of historical fiction and open-world exploration made it a game that has stayed with me all these years. You weren't just playing through a character's life. You were living in it while absorbing the atmosphere, mastering the parkour, and pulling off those fluid assassinations like a total pro. When I think back, Assassin's Creed 2 isn't just a game in the series, as it was a chapter in gaming history that elevated what an open-world action game could be. While other games in the series are also good, I still find Assassin's Creed 2 as the best in the series. Next up, we have The Last of Us. Years might pass, new games might come and go, but the story of Joel and Ellie sticks with you after reaching the ending. The game isn't simply about surviving a post-apocalyptic world, it's about the human connections and the lengths we'll go to protect those we love. Every encounter with the infected isn't just another fight. It's a desperate, tension-filled moment where every bullet, every swing of a bat counts. And then there are the quiet, hauntingly beautiful moments that punctuate the violence. Joel and Ellie's relationship is the beating heart of this game, and watching them grow closer despite the horrors around them is something that truly resonated with me. The ending, with all its moral ambiguity, still has me thinking and debating about it years later. A game that makes you question not just the character's choices, but your own is something rare. Even after all these years, revisiting The Last of Us always feels like experiencing something profound all over again. And with the remake now available, everything has been lifted to a whole new level. The visuals, the mechanics, all given the polish they deserve. If you haven't played it yet, or even if you have but are craving a fresh experience, the remake is totally worth diving into. It's a timeless tale that somehow feels even more powerful with the improvements made. Sekiro is the kind of game that demands a level of patience and skill that few others do, but the payoff? Absolutely exhilarating. The first time you step into Ashina, it feels almost serene until you realize everything in this world wants to kill you in the most merciless way possible. What sets Sekiro apart, even from its cousins like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, is how much it revolves around precision. It's not just about leveling up your character, it's about mastering your blade. Each enemy encounter is like a dance, a deadly, relentless dance, where one misstep means you're starting over. I find myself coming back because of those intense battles, each one a test of wits, patience, and perfect timing. And let's not forget the grappling hook. Swinging from one rooftop to the next, sneaking up on unsuspecting enemies, gives this sense of verticality that's refreshing for this type of game. There's also the way Sekiro weaves its story, not through dialogue-heavy cutscenes, but through the world itself. The mythos of the Undying, the quest for immortality, it's all wrapped in this dark, beautiful package. The boss fights, don't get me started on how heart-poundingly intense they are. Facing off against the likes of Lady Butterfly or the Guardian Ape, it's not just about brute force, it's about learning, adapting, and playing smarter. Every battle is a lesson in humility and perseverance, but the rush when you finally get that parry just right is unmatchable. Sekiro's a game that respects your time by treating every second as an opportunity to improve. That's why I keep diving back, because that challenge and sense of mastery make every victory feel like it was truly earned. So, after getting fully immersed in the punishing yet rewarding world of Sekiro, I found myself craving another challenge. Something equally demanding, but with its own twist. And that's where Sifu came into play. If Sekiro taught me the art of patience and precision, Sifu took those lessons and wrapped them in a fresh, exhilarating package. This game is all about mastering your martial arts skills, but it adds a unique layer that Sekiro didn't explore: the aging mechanic. Every time you get knocked down in Sifu, you come back older but also wiser, stronger, but with a cost. It's this balance that keeps every fight engaging and tense. You're not just trying to survive, you're trying to do it with finesse, knowing each defeat brings you closer to that inevitable end. The combat is fluid and impactful, demanding the same kind of rhythm and timing that made Sekiro such a standout experience for me. But here's where Sifu really hooked me. Where Sekiro focused on swordplay and precision, Sifu feels more like a brawler where every punch and kick can be strung into a combo with that same level of mastery weaved into every move. You're not just button mashing, every action needs to be deliberate. Between the slick, stylized visuals and the way the game challenges you to adapt and grow with every new life, Sifu offers that same sense of satisfaction I got from beating a tough boss in Sekiro. It's a relentless, tough-as-nails experience, but one that rewards you for every ounce of effort you put in. Next up is Need for Speed Most Wanted. This game has left such a lasting impression on me that no matter how many racing games come out, it remains one of my all-time favorites. Before open-world racing games became a dime a dozen, Most Wanted dropped and set the standard for what a high-stakes racing experience should feel like. There was just something about the way it combined the thrill of high-speed chases with a gripping blacklist storyline that kept me hooked for hours on end. You weren't just racing, you were challenging rivals, building your reputation, and trying to outmaneuver the relentless police force, which, by the way, done all with that incredible sense of speed the series was known for. The cop chases were especially unforgettable, as they created those edge-of-your-seat moments where one wrong move could mean the end of a perfect run. And let's talk about the cars. The ability to fine-tune and deck out your ride until it was unstoppable was endlessly satisfying. Even today, Most Wanted holds up remarkably well. The open-world city, the insane cop chases, and the pure unfiltered sense of speed with Most Wanted Need for Speed truly cemented itself as a legend in racing games. It's one of those titles that, even years later, pulls me back in whenever I crave a racing experience that's more about sheer excitement than just crossing the finish line. Up next, we have the Uncharted series. Nathan Drake isn't just some treasure hunter. He's that character who manages to feel real, even when the world around him is crumbling in the most spectacular ways possible. It's hard to pick just one standout moment because, honestly, the series is packed with them. Scaling a derelict train that's teetering off a cliff in Uncharted 2 felt iconic the first time I played it, and it still does today. Uncharted 3 had you navigating a capsizing cruise ship, and I swear, it just kept one-upping itself every single time. And don't even get me started on Uncharted 4's car chase scene. It's not just games, it's cinematic storytelling at its peak. Even now, years after playing them, those set pieces stick with me like few other gaming experiences do. The treasure hunting is undeniably cool, digging through ancient ruins, outsmarting complex puzzles, and stumbling onto lost cities straight out of Legend. But it's the human element that keeps you invested. Each game in the series manages to blend humor, heart, and adventure into this cocktail that leaves you craving more. You could feel the relentless energy Naughty Dog poured into each chase sequence, each shootout, each quiet moment of character reflection. The Uncharted series exemplified what it meant to create an interactive Hollywood blockbuster, and even now, those adventures feel as fresh and thrilling as the first time I pressed start. Next up is the Monster Hunter series. It is one of those rare franchises that really grew on me over time. When I first picked it up, in this case Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, I was overwhelmed. There were so many mechanics to learn, so many different monsters to study that I almost put it down. But after that first successful hunt, I was hooked. The sense of accomplishment in these games hits differently. You're not just leveling up or grinding for experience. You're studying these towering beasts, learning their patterns, collecting materials, crafting new gear. It's this deeply rewarding loop that kept pulling me back in, turning every hunt into an epic event. Even now, I still get that rush when I gear up, grab my weapon of choice, usually a longsword, and head out to the wilds knowing I'm about to tackle something massive and probably deadly. Every hunt's a challenge, but it's the community aspect that makes it 10 times better when you team up. Whether you're helping a friend take down their first Rathalos or going toe-to-toe with some Elder Dragon, the camaraderie is real, and with the upcoming Monster Hunter Wilds next year, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a busy nights for me. Up next, we have Nier Automata. The game starts with what seems like your typical humans versus machines setup, with flashy combat and a stunningly desolate landscape. But the further you go, you realize you're in for something so much deeper. The story, if you can even call it just that, kinda spools out like threads from an old, worn-out tapestry, each playthrough expanding on the last until you feel more tangled up in its questions about autonomy, existentialism, and what it means to be human than ever before. But the thing is, the game wants you to think. Combat's fast, fluid, and as satisfying as anything Platinum Games has ever put out, but it's also an emotional backdrop to what's essentially an exploration of identity and self-worth. Then there's 2B, 9S, and A2, whose stories interlace with both sadness and hope that leaves you contemplating long after you've put down the controller. The various endings too are something to marvel at. The game practically resets itself, not once, but multiple times, with each iteration deepening the narrative and offering fresh perspectives. Nier Automata is an experience, an art piece, that still resonates deeply with me. If you haven't tried it yet, then I strongly recommend this one too. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game that feels like it transcends the medium. And if I'm being honest, it's the crown jewel among all the titles I've ever played. You saddle up with Arthur Morgan, and from the very beginning, there's something undeniably special about this journey. It's almost overwhelming how much detail Rockstar poured into every single grain of this cowboy's tale. Arthur Morgan's journey is gripping, sure, but it's the little moments that elevate it to something truly special. Those quiet times around the campfire, the random interactions with strangers, or the sheer joy of exploring the wilderness at your own pace. And the way the world responds to your choices, how your honor system affects everything from story outcomes to how people treat you, makes you feel like your actions have real weight. Every mission, every side quest is dripping with narrative depth, pulling you deeper into Arthur's struggles and the complexities of the Van der Linde gang. But it's not just the story that sets Red Dead Redemption 2 apart for me, it's the overwhelming sense of freedom and realism. The game gives you an open world that feels more alive than some real places I've visited. Out of all the games on this list, Red Dead 2 stands as my number one, not just because of its scale or its beauty, but because it's a game that sticks with you long after you've put down the controller. And there you have it. Did any of these favorites make your top list too? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.